Hey, it's Tina Forsyth here. Let's talk boundaries. In particular, the three biggest mistakes that I see service providers making when it comes to establishing boundaries with their clients. Now, if you've been in business for any length of time, chances are you've experienced a working relationship where there weren't good boundaries or maybe weak boundaries or no boundaries at all. I mean, frankly, as service providers, we can get run ragged by our clients if we're not purposeful around setting good boundaries, right? If you feel like you're in a space right now where your clients are sucking the life out of you, chances are it's a boundary issue that you need to take a look at. Now, I will talk in a future video or a future article about the different types of boundaries that you want to set as a service provider. There's some really key ones that we want to make sure we have in place. But I want to touch on today the three biggest mistakes that I'll see service providers make. Mistake number one is looking at a boundary as a shield versus looking at a boundary as an agreement. As a default, I will often see service providers approaching boundaries from the perspective of, you can't do this, you can't do that, this isn't right, I'm not going to stand for this, that doesn't work for me, etc., etc., etc. It's basically like, no, I'm just saying no to you. It's putting up a defense shield, right? And I get why this happens, because especially if you've experienced something where boundaries were not respected or boundaries were not established or put in place at all, you can really feel like you have to put that shield up. But when you put that shield up, when you're approaching boundaries on the defensive, you're setting up your relationship to be like this with your client. And that's just not a good way to work together. When we look at boundaries as an agreement, that means that both you and your client are on the same page around what does it take for us to work successfully together. What's going to work for me as the service provider and what's going to work for you based on what you're hiring me to help you with, and making sure that we're on the same page together. So boundaries as an agreement, not as a shield. That's mistake number one to shift. Mistake number two is not actually talking to our clients about the boundaries. So I'll see often that a service provider will say, I have everything outlined in my welcome package. It's in my contract. It's on my website. This is the way I work with, this is the way I work with people. These are my standards or my boundaries or whatever it is. That's great. We want to have these things clearly written and outlined. But if you haven't actually talked to your client about them, then I will say that no agreement has happened yet. I mean, because let's be real, a lot of times clients aren't reading our agreements in full. Or maybe they read it, but just kind of like surfacey, like, okay, yeah, right? If you want a boundary to be established, you actually have to be willing to have a conversation with your clients around that boundary. That's part of your intake process. Like, hey, let's talk about the best way for us to work together so that we can be really successful in creating what it is we're here to do together, right? You want to talk through these things and you want to get agreement, meaning, does that work for you? Yes, it works for me. Great. Now we're on the same page, right? So it's so important to have that conversation with clients, either upfront when you're starting to work with them. Ideally, it becomes that what part of the initial intake process. Or if you're a little further along with a client and you just haven't had the boundaries conversation yet, great. You can bring that conversation into the mix at any time. Now, the third biggest mistake that service providers make is thinking that, okay, once I've set the boundary, that's it. Now it's just going to I'm never going to have to talk about it again and everything will be fine. I hate to tell you that you're going to have to enforce your boundaries from time to time, right? Now, with some clients, it feels like you're having to lovingly remind them more often than you would like. With other clients, it might be quicker and simpler to get into that good space and flow where there's just nice, beautifully set and respected boundaries. But there's no such thing as like set it and forget it when it comes to boundaries. You may need to remind clients about it. You may need to have additional conversations. You may need to get good at even saying no to your clients around certain things. And so boundaries don't happen in that you need to have that initial conversation to come to agreement. But the boundaries actually come to life, if you will, when we're willing to enforce them and when we're willing to like actually live and operate that way. And when we land in this space where we have great, beautiful boundaries with our clients, it's such a good thing on all sides, right? You feel like you're able to do great work. You're not, getting drained and tired and exhausted and run ragged and all kinds of things. And your clients are feeling like, hey, I'm getting good service, I'm getting good results, I'm getting good deliverables based on the agreement that you've come up with together. I mean, boundaries, again, can set the stage for a really beautiful working relationship. So I would love to hear from you. What have boundaries meant for you in your business so far, right? Do you feel like you have good, solid, strong boundaries right now? Or do you feel like, I don't know, I'm not even sure what boundaries to set, or, I've tried setting boundaries, but I'm having a hard time enforcing them. I'm curious to hear from you, like, what has your experience been with boundaries? What are you feeling like about boundaries at the moment here? Go ahead, comment with this video and or reply to this email if you receive this as part of a newsletter. I would love to hear from you. And yes, I will be sharing more and giving you more about, some more tips and tricks and types of boundaries that you want to be setting as part of your business as well. All right, until next time, it's Tina Forsyth. Bye now.